Okay, thank you, Chair. We're live on YouTube, so I'll hand over to you to start.
Thank you. First of all, apologies for starting slightly late, entirely my fault. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual consultative scrutiny meeting on the 7th of April 2022. I am your chair, Councillor Tom Wright. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live stream. Based on the decision at our council meeting on the 8th of December, where members voted in favour of the continuation of virtual meetings until the 11th of May 2022, I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-taking power to our senior officers. This is due to concerns relating to the COVID risk. Consequently, this meeting is being held remotely and on a consultative basis only, but we will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our constitution. This meeting can be viewed live online and will be recorded. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language and that the code of conduct applies throughout our meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this consultative scrutiny meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and we'll reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Our Democratic Services Officer, Sarah, will now do the roll call. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Bonetta.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCollum.
Present, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Parr.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Councillor Rylance.
Present.
Councillor Wibley.
Present.
Councillor Woodward.
Present.
And Councillor Tom Wright.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting's quorate.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to welcome our two new members. I think that's Councillor Joe Wibley and Councillor Tony Woodward. Am I right in that, Sarah?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, welcome both of you. I know you attended a previous meeting, but that was a more open meeting, and it's good to see you here, and I hope you are able to contribute as you think valuably to our proceedings. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Item number 2, public speaking. I have been told there are no members of the public registered to speak. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 2 are the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of March and the extraordinary meeting held on the 17th of March. If anyone has a comment on either set of minutes on the 3rd of March or the 17th of March, please do this by raising your electronic hand. If I see no hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you're all happy that both sets of minutes are accepted. Any raised hands?
No, there's no raised hands, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Allen, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Bruce and Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. When your name is called, please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to. If it is a personal or prejudicial declaration, and state what exactly that interest is, please. Sarah, would you please do the roll call for declarations?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bonetta.
No declarations to my knowledge, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
None that I'm aware, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCollum.
None, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Parr.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance.
None, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wibley.
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
None, thank you.
And Councillor Wright.
None, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair.
Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. I've not been notified of any matters of urgency. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Item 6, confidential exempt items. I've not been told of any such items. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 7, decisions made by Cabinet, including portfolio holders called in by members for scrutiny in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rules. There are no items to consider, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Chair. Yes.
Agenda item 8 is a forward plan, pages 12 to 13. At the extraordinary meeting on the 17th of March, the committee decided that it would like to invite South West Water back for a series of meetings, with each meeting to have a particular topic. The committee initially identified the following 3 main topics: planning, beach water, river water. Members may wish to raise and identify further topics as we go through this meeting. South West Water have agreed to attend for a series of daytime meetings on a similar basis to the one already held. The purpose of this item is to continue the discussion started at the extraordinary meeting on how best to progress future meetings with South West Water. I know that many members, or some members, were at least disappointed that their questions were not covered by the meeting of the 17th of March. But that meeting was called to address the specific issue of untreated sewage entering our rivers and watercourses. The concerns about South West Water are much wider than that, particularly whether the infrastructure is able to cope with the increased pressures of increased development. The forward plan could set out a timetable to deal with the wider issues. The policing of the discharge of the sewage is for the Environment Agency, and the monitoring of our bathing water quality is also an Environment Agency responsibility. These issues affect us all and our visitors. So through this meeting, through this committee, we do have an opportunity to do something that will improve things for all. Back to the script now. I will now invite non-members of the committee to speak by raising their electronic hands. Sarah.
Councillor Young, followed by Councillor Hookway, followed by Councillor Bailey, please. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for arranging the previous meeting with South West Water. We certainly learned quite a lot from that. And it's quite clear that sewage discharge and agricultural runoff is East Devon wide. I've spoken to loads of people in the last couple of weeks about this issue. We know that the ACS has major issues. Sidmouth's council is concerned for the River Sid. In Exmouth, there is a group demanding action. And Lympston, Woodbury and Clifton Mary have major concerns. Every single catchment is affected one way or another. So rather than creating loads of little wheels, I would like to suggest to the Scrutiny Committee that a working group of interested bodies create one big wheel to join up to coordinate a comprehensive response. It doesn't need to be councillors, but a small team of concerned community residents, some with really good knowledge of engineering and pollution I've spoken to in the last couple of weeks. And they would be able to help collate and discuss with South West Water and Environment Agency, and be able to invite specialists to help formulate a long-term permanent solution. East Devon District Council is not the lead body on pollution matters, and therefore we should simply act as a facilitator for this exercise. However, we need to recognise that this affects our requirement to provide housing and jobs, as demonstrated by the Environment Agency, Natural England requirement to prevent development in the catchment. We must do everything to prevent other locations having similar restrictions and work constructively with all the stakeholders. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. I can understand and have some sympathy for that view. As you say, we are not the principal players in this, but it's through us we can put pressure on the principal players. I think a lot of the problems, although we see evidence of them downstream in the discharges into our rivers and waters and discharge into our bathing waters, I think the fundamental issue is the one of lack of infrastructure. So I think before we can progress anything else, we do actually need to look into the planning issues to see why the planning process does not ensure that the infrastructure is in place to deal with the pressures brought on by that planning. So I think that is something where we can ask South West Water to explain in some detail how they provide the infrastructure, on what basis they formulate their plans going forward for infrastructure, because if the infrastructure is good, none of the other issues arise. I think we do well to actually tackle the planning and infrastructure issue first, and then see what spins off from that, because that is the issue with Exmouth. It's their treatment works because of lack of infrastructure. They're having to take sewage from elsewhere with the movement of trucks. Now, I don't want to hog the thing. I hear exactly what you're saying, Jeff, and I'm very keen on allowing outside interested parties, relevant parties, to get involved in this. But now, what do other members, not of the committee, what do other members not of the committee have to say? Thank you.
Councillor Hookway's next, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I want to follow on from Councillor Young's comments, please, if I may, and refer about jobs, and particularly those in tourism, and also and those in Exmouth, where we have the River Exe, which has sewage being dumped into it by South West Water. I'm quite sure many of us would appreciate that if visitors to Exmouth realised that raw sewage was going into the River Exe and the beaches that they were using, they wouldn't be too pleased about it. And I'm going to ask if the committee would consider approaching this from a different point of view, because my question is this. The River Exe is a specially protected area. It's an area that this council, along with others, operates the South East Devon Habitat Regulations Partnership. So my first question is South West Water conducting an illegal operation dumping raw sewage into the River Exe? And if so, are there any avenues we can take? And if they're not in breach of any law, are there any other legal avenues that we can take against South West Water to persuade them to get this problem solved? Because I think it is, as you say, it's a planning issue, but it's also a matter of impact upon tourism, which is what particularly concerns me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that very brief and very well set out argument. I would also point out that the River Otter is itself a site of special scientific interest. I think all our rivers are very, very important environmentally. But again, this comes to what I've just said. The people who police what is discharged into the river are the Environment Agency. And so anything we do must concern them, to ask what they are doing about ensuring the levels are within a reasonable amount. No, in my view, no sewage should go into our watercourses, but I think that's a situation we're not going to arrive at. Anyway, thank you for Jeff, and that will be noted and can be formed the subject of future meetings. Who's next? Not on the committee.
Well, Chair, the Deputy Monitoring Officer has her hand up, so I don't know if you'd like to go to Anita first.
Yes, please. Keep us on the straight and narrow, Anita.
Oh dear, sorry, muted. Chair, it was just to I think to give the reminder that this is the discussion about the forward plan, not perhaps the substantive discussion. It's very apparent that this is a very detailed subject, and that was clear from the discussion with South West Water. And I think the discussion that we had after the South West Water meeting was about putting together these series of meetings to give an overview on the major topics, so planning, river discharge, seawater discharge, so that members can have that information from our council officers, so that they get a really good overview on those areas. That will then allow members to identify other topics and to drill down into some of those areas, those more detailed areas. And we know how complicated this is, but to drill down then from a more informed basis, having heard from the council officers about their views and from others. As you say, it's perfectly open to you to invite others to the meeting, but I think that was the point about this suggestion of starting in this way, so that we get that basic or information and then drill down from there. So I just wanted to perhaps pop that on the table for consideration.
Thank you for reminding us of that, Anita. As I say, the topic for discussion tonight is how we progress that and the priorities for asking the right questions of the right people. Now, I notice that Councillor Moulding, who's not a member of the committee, has had his hand up for some time. Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will be aware the report went to the recent Strategic Planning Committee meeting regarding the River Acts and the requirements for mitigation to offset pollution. And we learnt from that report to strategic planning that the pollution of the River Acts by phosphates is 70% from agriculture and 30% from sewage. Now, as I see it, the sewage in the Axminster area, certainly from the Axminster town and the Axe Valley villages, actually goes to Kilmington, to the sewage works. Now, according to the report from Mr. Crawford, that sewage works has been out of action for 2 years, and that all sewage sludge from Kilmington goes to Exmouth and gets discharged into the sea. Now, if that's the case, then obviously currently, and for the last 2 years, there's been no grey water discharge from the Kilmington sewage works into the ground and into the River Axe. So what that makes me think that therefore, if that is the case, and that when the sewage works reopen, that they can be made to work in such a way that there is no effluent discharge from those sewage works, then what we need to address in the Axe Valley is not grey water, but agricultural habits. And that will be another story. But I'm also looking at the situation regarding planning applications, because we were told that planning applications in the Axe Valley would have to be turned down and they would be refused on the basis of these discharges. And that would be for residential properties and for commercial properties. Now, from commercial properties and even from residential properties, if the grey water is not being dealt with at the Kilmington Sewage Works, but is being dealt with elsewhere, then how can that then be polluting the River Axe? It must then just be agriculture that is polluting the River Axe. So I think that's a question that we ought to put to South West Water, because obviously the matter of all planning applications in the whole of the Axe Valley being refused is a serious matter for the development and viability of that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That in some way amplifies a point that planning should be at the top of the list or one of the priorities. We are looking at sewage. I know the phosphate and agricultural runoff is another thing, but there is a scheme run by the Environment Agency called catchment sensitive farming, and that is something else we can explore with the Environment Agency. Is that all of the non-committee members? Sarah, I think it is, isn't it?
No, Chair. Councillor
the
Bailey and Councillor Cahill and Councillor Arnott.
Thank you. Well, we'll call Councillor Bailey first, as she was the one who got this, I don't want to say a show on the road, but got us looking into this matter as we ought to. So over to you, Councillor Bailey. Jess.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, thank you for putting this on the forward plan. And I think there's been a lot of comments this evening, which is fair enough, and questions, but they're detailed questions. And I think today the purpose is to analyse how we're going to move forward and set a really tight structure for how we go about that. And so I don't actually agree in this case with Councillor Young, because I think whilst I completely value the different groups, I think it's incumbent on us as elected representatives to channel the concerns and to very much involve the groups through that. Just as they participated very eloquently in our last meeting, I think that's a really effective way of involving very knowledgeable people and groups. So that would be my first comment. And the way that I would like to see it, or suggest to the committee if they might be minded to consider this, I completely agree with the three categories. And what I believe that we should do is have perhaps monthly meetings, consecutive months on those three topics: planning, beach and rivers. And we have a structure so that 2 weeks in advance, everybody has to submit their questions. 1 week in advance, the agenda papers get published, including the answers to the questions and any officers' reports. So then we're all in an informed position, and also, so South West Water's answers and any officers' reports if they feel that they have expertise and input on that particular subject. And then we can have our meetings. And what I feel is really important is that I would prefer not to have a lengthy presentation from South West Water, because I believe that they should provide the information in advance of that meeting, which we have with our agenda papers in the normal way. And then we can most usefully use the time available. And I would suggest that an hour is not sufficient. So I would suggest a minimum of 2 hours. And the final point that I'd ask to consider is that whilst we had Mr. Burrows here before, and that was interesting, I really do feel that we should invite Susan Davey as the CEO to attend. Now, she may be too busy and she may not want to attend, but I really feel that this council should extend an invitation specifically to her to attend at least one of those series of proposed 3 meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. As you summed up at the end, Jess, we can't compel South West Water to do anything. We can ask, and I would hope that the leader of the council, if he's sympathetic, could use his authority to actually impress upon South West Water the urgency and the importance of getting issue addressed. Who's next? Sarah, please.
Non-committee members still, Councillor Cahill, followed by Councillor Arnott, and then Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you. You call them when you're ready, Sarah, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cahill then.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I have read some of the data, and I just want to bring to the members' attention a little thing called a clean sweep program, and I'm taking you a little bit back in history, and I think it's important to think about this. Back in history, in 1992, the clean sweep for South West Water started around the Southwest Peninsula. It started in Bigbury in 1992. Exmouth was done in 1997, and what was built at Exmouth, I'll come on to in a minute, but it was actually finished in 2007. So that was the whole clean sweep program. It cost a lot of money. It also put the Southwest Water bills for the people living in the Southwest at quite a high premium. In fact, I think it was known that it was the most expensive water bill in the whole of the country. But just going back to a few of the comments made earlier and to do with Exmouth, and I do have a little bit of knowledge about this sewage treatment works that was built because I played a part in its construction. Now, for those that are not aware, we do have 3 very large storage tanks, one on Imperial Road car park, and these are underground, one in Fear Park and one in Mayor Road.
Thank you, Fred. I know the members will appreciate the history, but we do want to.
No, I'm coming to the point.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, well, I'm allowed to actually talk about this, am I not?
Yes, but we will. What happened in 1997 is not relevant. What we want to happen now.
I please.
Thank you, Fred.
Please do not interrupt, and I'll carry on. Thank you. I'll go back to what I said. At the time of this sewage treatment works, the treatment of the sewage was done and clean water was pumped out at Straight Point. That's where the sewage outfall is. The other 2, one's in the estuary and one's on the Mare, and they're both valves and they do overflow. So that's when sewage goes out, when we have an overload of the system. What I'm trying to say here, Chair and members, is that back in those days, we had great investment in a system that should have been fit for purpose for the future. It's not. Why is it not fit for purpose? Because we continue to develop in the town, and South West Water are not part of that planning process. So perhaps it would be a good idea, and I totally agree with Councillor Bailey and her comments, that we need to look at this in a more in-depth way, because the future is what's going to turn this around. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Fred. Councillor Arnott, the leader of the council, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, Chair, for that billing, as ever. Quite unnecessary, but very kind of you. Yes, I won't go into any details about anything on this, but just to say that I was also at the strategic planning meeting on Thursday, and this is shocking news. we need to be a little bit careful here, because we must work with South West Water and we must work with the Environment Agency moving forward. And although scrutiny is absolutely the right forum for a courteous examination of how they've been doing and what they're planning to do in the future, I do think we need to be careful not to set this up as a sort of public grilling. I just think we need to be careful about that. The reason I say that is that I'd already asked the CEO, well, I'll give you some context. So Team Devon are already aware of the very serious problems with anaerobic digesters, for example, which are creating another form of pollution. And so there'll be some joint action taken through Team Devon on that. The other thing on this subject is that we need to have an urgent meeting, a high-level meeting with both the Environment Agency and South West Water and elements of the executive in the same room, because this is urgent. This is an absolute crisis now. The essence of the problem with the Environment Agency is that the individuals who work for the Environment Agency do great work, but they have been defunded by central government. I mean, ruthlessly defunded by central government, and therefore they're not able to enforce, and they are not enforcing. And going to Councillor Moulding's point, which is well made, the evidence is that our great friends in the farming community, we mustn't be horrible about them at all, but because of current farming practices, which have not evolved in any way since the 2016 referendum result, that no new measures have been put in place over that 6 years. Sadly, what they are putting on the soil is leaching into our brooks and into our rivers, and that is what is primarily causing this phosphates problem. There's a huge problem with slurry lagoons, and I quite agree with you, Chair. That goes to planning, doesn't it? Planning policy. And I'm sure I remember Councillor Bailey objecting to slurry lagoons before, and it seems as if we just don't seem to have the power to block them. It seems as if there isn't the enforcement in place to make sure they're properly capped or sealed. It looks as if some of them just get started without having met the fundamental conditions of their planning permission as well. So the Environment Agency are a big player in this. And I think there needs to be parallel work going on. Certainly there will be cabinet meetings, I just want to be clear about this, with South West Water and the EA urgently. And we will absolutely demand that they meet us about this, because the Axe Valley story is a total crisis. But also, obviously, scrutiny has a really good role into digging deeper into this and bringing it into the public domain. But the only thing I'd say, Chair, is just I think we'll win more friends with honey than vinegar on this. We need to be very careful that we don't end up grandstanding against either agency. They're struggling. Well, South West Water isn't an agency; it's a private company. So, to a certain extent, they're more open to criticism, I suppose. The Environment Agency, as far as I can see, are doing the job they're trying. They're doing a job, but they're doing half the job because they're missing half the money. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I don't want to paraphrase you, and I hope I'm not inaccurate. What you're saying is that it needs to be at a higher level, more collaborative, not just with East Devon, but with the county as a whole, and South West Water and the Environment Agency. Is that what you were suggesting? Because I would go along with that. I've always had an interest in an issue, and I used to attend the twice-a-year meetings, and the interesting thing was I was the only elected member throughout Devon, Cornwall and Somerset who actually put himself onto that meeting. So I am aware of the background that the Environment Agency and South West Water have been doing, particularly with regard to bathing water. And what I don't want to do is to tilt at windmills if what we do is actually not going to have any effect. But I'll now throw it open to the rest of the committee. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Well, Chair, Councillor De Serum's still got his hand up as a non-member.
Oh, sorry, Bruce.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Chair. I could put my hand up later. What I was thinking is what you were talking about earlier, about the need to separate out the policing matters, which are clearly dealt with the Environment Agency, and those challenges that South West Water face, such as public education programs around their Love Your Loo program with the 3 Ps that was touched on at the last meeting, because it's very important, I think, that we understand that, because obviously, as the leader just said, they work, South West Water and the Environment Agency have a lot of interconnected responsibilities. And also I point out that in terms of planning, Councillor Hookway and myself undertook a site visit to Plum Park a few weeks ago, and we did ask about the sewage, and they assured us that they had prepared the correct tanks, etc., that you need to make this work. So I think maybe also look at how do developers go about it, and possibly ask Taylor Wimpey to come back to you for some form of guidance, because clearly, as I'm sure Councillor Hookway is also on this call will confirm, they were very, Taylor Wimpey were very assured to us, were very positive, that they had done the right thing as far as the treatment of sewage is concerned from the developments that they put forward in Plum Park. So those were the quick items I put forward, Chair, and thank you so much for giving me the platform to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, Sarah. Members of the committee now, please.
Yes, Councillor Rylance, followed by Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chair. So, like other members, I think probably I was quite disquieted by some of the things that we heard from the South West Water representative. And bearing in mind that we are actually talking about the forward plan and how we should frame our work to do with improving the quality of our waters, a couple of the things that I was quite disquieted by was, first of all, the fact that South West Water is not a statutory consultee in planning terms. And I think that needs addressing. But obviously, that's not something we can address between East Devon Council, the Environment Agency, and South West Water. So what I'm suggesting is that we pull in other actors into this group to try and so that was my first concern. And my second concern was also about the fact that it seems that the Environment Agency doesn't do any beach testing in the winter, even though we now have a year-round tourist industry and people who like to swim even in cold water, even in the winter. And again, that's going to require some form of extra legislation, I suspect. So what I was going to suggest is that we focus, instead of focusing on what can and can't be enforced and who does what and who does this, and actually I disagree with Councillor Desaram very strongly and agree far more with Councillor Arnott on this. I think we should be working a lot more collaboratively with probably more agencies, and the primary focus should be clean water. Instead of focusing on what is enforceable and what can be done and what could be done by whom, and actually creating problems for ourselves, we need to put clean water first, centrally to everything we do, and work out who we need to pull in at every single juncture to achieve that. Because it's quite clear that we have a problem with fragmentation between enforcement and who's responsible for what. And quite frankly, the sewage is sliding into the rivers between the gaps. And I don't think, unless we turn this problem on its head and starting with the clean water and working out how we can achieve that, where the dirt is coming from, where the bad stuff is coming from, and working out how we can stop that, then we're not going to be able to solve this. We're just going to be patching. And so what I'd really like to see is actually we extend out our list of people who are involved in this and include DEFRA as well, and anybody who we can appeal to introduce primary legislation to bring about the changes that we need to have, including testing year round. Because let's be honest, most of the releases of raw sewage into the rivers happen in the winter because that's when it's raining. But if they're not testing beach quality in the winter and they're not really testing the river quality in the winter, then we don't actually know what's going into the rivers in the winter, really. And I suspect that's something we really need to have a look at if our aim really is clean water. But also really massively think we should be asking that water companies be made statutory consultees, and they be consulted far earlier in the process, so that by the time we actually build our 900 houses or our 2,000 houses, the infrastructure to handle the waste is already in place. We can't deliver that post facto. That it's not working. It's just definitely not working for some of our villages, and it's going to cause us a lot of problems quite soon. So I think we really do need to focus on this very proactively and getting some proper legislation in place. And we're going to need to involve our MPs, and we're going to need to involve government bodies. So that would be my suggestion. Then instead of only having South West Water and the EA and effectively putting them in the dock, that we actually make this a collaborative process where we work out what's possible and what we still need to get done in order to achieve clean water. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. I think water, that should be our aim. You touched on the monitoring of the bathing water. That's something close to my heart. People swim every day here at Butley, and that's something that we can have an impact on. When I was environment portfolio holder, and I did pass the invitation on to the current portfolio holder, we did get an invitation to that meeting where Surfers Against Sewage, the Environment Agency, South West Water, the various conservation bodies to do with the beach attended, and that's an area where we could influence what is done, certainly by the Environment Agency, with regard to testing our bathing waters throughout the peninsula. And that perhaps that's something Councillor Young could take on board, because that was certainly high on my priorities when I was the environment portfolio holder. Who's next, Sarah?
Councillor Parr, followed by Councillor Ranger.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to the agenda item, which is the forward plan, I thought Councillor Bailey made some very good suggestions, and if she could repeat them, I'd like to propose those for the framework for the next meeting. And also I'd like to propose that we invite the Environment Agency to do a meeting so that we can all understand what their role is in policing of this, just as we've had South West Water and we're going to have them again, hopefully, to pursue matters. I think we ought to have a meeting with the Environment Agency so we, as I say, understand how they work, and then possibly in the forward plan, could we have a meeting with DEFRA and find out what their role in all of this is and what they're doing? Because I think before we have or try and be part of joint meetings, we need to understand what each of these bodies is doing. So firstly, I'd like to know what Councillor Bailey's proposals were for this this next meeting with South West Water, and if we can agree that would be the framework for it, because lots of people have put in some amazing comments this evening, but actually they need to come at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I agree with you at that, and we are quite fortunate in this area that we have not only is the Cabinet Minister for the Environment a resident of the West Country, one of the MPs for this district council is in fact also a chairs an environment committee which meets at Westminster. So perhaps we could invite them, because they are actually at the end of the day the people who can shell out the money and get action done. So Jess, can you form something along Helen's lines, please?
Thank you very much. So I suggested that there would be 3 meetings in consecutive months to address the points, the comments, subject matters that the committee has discussed before. So that's planning, beaches and rivers, and that they're structured in such a way that 2 weeks before everybody submits any questions that's forwarded on to South West Water, and then so that then a week before each meeting, South West Water, their answers are published, any report on that topic matter, so that then everybody goes into those meetings in a well-informed position.
Thank you.
I totally agree with the aims there, but I'm just wondering whether we need to be sure that the week for the South West Water to reply is sufficient. Because what I hate to do is them to suddenly say we don't have time. So it might be that we have to monitor the timetable, perhaps more advanced notice of the meetings with more time for the questions to get to the South West Water to give them an opportunity to answer. I think it's nothing worse than saying we haven't got time to answer this. So Anita, is that something that's within the remit of this committee? I know we can't command South West Water to do anything, but I did detect that they are keen to become a bit more collaborative and explain their problems to us, so perhaps we can ease the situation.
Chair, they certainly seem quite keen from Sarah's interaction with them. So we can ask it. It is a bit tight, and as we found last time, what happened, of course, was that the questions didn't come in at the time, and everything slipped. So we'd have to have, if we're going to have deadlines, they'd have to be guillotined deadlines if we're going to hit, which we're all in favour of. We like those. What I just wanted to check with Councillor Bailey. So I think what you're suggesting is quite similar to what we'd suggested in the forward plan, but missing out what we proposed was a 2-meeting structure, effectively, that you had an ordinary scrutiny evening meeting that we could bring the council's relevant officers into with their report, so members could have a bit more of a discussion. We know that the South West Water meeting is not going to be something that where you can toss ideas around as you might do at a normal scrutiny meeting. So what we'd suggested was you have the initial scrutiny meeting in the evening, your normal timetabled meeting, to consider I think we've described it as the relevant officers, so planning, environmental health, whoever you think can add value, to consider those reports in a format where you can toss those ideas around, then a deadline for members for questions, having been informed by the reports, to then go to South West Water. So very similar, but with another step to give a bit more time for consideration. I don't know what you were thinking about that.
That sounds right. I'm conscious of the daytime meetings. There are a lot of our members are workers. They're still in work. They have other commitments. And I know morning meetings are difficult for them.
Chair, if I may, Chair, I think that's why we were also thinking you could have that initial scrutiny meeting, the evening meeting, to enable everybody to have a say and to take the questions forward. The South West Water meeting would then be recorded, so members' questions could go forward, and those who couldn't attend could still see, and they could still have been involved in that EDDC scrutiny meeting. But I think Councillor Bailey just wanted to come back, and that would be helpful, and then we can try.
The only thing I want to say, Sarah, the days when senior officers and senior members of organisations only wanted to work 9-5, I think are far gone. They certainly were long gone in my day. And I don't think it's unreasonable to actually perhaps invite a representation from one of these organisations to work more flexibly. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey, did you want to just come back on?
Sorry, I only wanted just to say that I don't really disagree with that, but my worry would be that would take quite a long time if then you're having a meeting and then South West Water and then another meeting. So, and my thought would be that the Scrutiny Committee might want at the end of those 3 meetings to form its recommendations. And I was just worried about it might take a long time if we're having intervening meetings. And the only other thing I forgot to say was that could Susan Davey be invited to at least one of those meetings? Thank you.
So, Chair, I think it's for committee to decide how you want to play it. There is the point about the timing. I think what we saw was that this is a really complex issue that you're not going to resolve in a short space of time anyway, and getting that information in and giving everybody a chance to participate might be worth the delay, but it's absolutely for the committee to decide, Chair. Got Councillor Ranger, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Young waiting.
Thank you. So when I put my hand up some time ago, I was going to say the sort of things that Jess has just said. Can we have dates for South West Water? Can we have dates for questions, officers' reports, and so on? But now I think I'd like to make a different proposal, recommendation, is that that we recommend that Cabinet, at the earliest opportunity, call the meeting where they call in the different groups, South West Water, Environment Agency, DEFRA, to set a good tone. And owing to the urgency of the matter, and I know it's not ever going to be solved overnight, but there is a concern, and I was the one that initially said about having these 3 meetings, but I am concerned about drift, and that, you know, a month, we don't have scrutiny meetings monthly necessarily, you know, and it will drift on, and then it will be the summer holidays, and then it will be September. So that is my proposal, is that this higher level meeting is held as soon as possible, and ideally, I don't know if it's possible to get farming representatives in, yeah, and Simon Jupp, yeah, and the MPs, and see where we're at. I mean, I can remember back in 2004 where money came from Europe for farmers to fence their land, to stop, you know, animals tracking into the river and further polluting rivers and things like that. You know, this is not new for farmers to hear that the rivers are being polluted by their methods. So I think it's quite important. That's why I think it's quite important that we hear sooner rather than later from a farming representative, you know, how seriously are they taking the matter of runoff into rivers? So I'm not against at all the schedule for meetings with South West Water going forward, but I'm mindful about, you know, we need to keep the tone careful. But equally, I'm mindful that they would just be a waste of time if we just have South West Water's PR spiel and reading what they put on their website, which obviously is that they are outstandingly marvellous, because that's what you put on your website. So I don't know what other members feel about that, whether they feel that it is more urgent that we get this meeting going, perhaps you know, with Cabinet meeting, with this higher level meeting, and then we can hear, you know, over time what South West Water have got to say, and maybe they'll have some updates. But certainly, also, I think if we are going to continue to scrutinise in this way, we need the Environment Agency on board as well.
Thank you for that, Val. I'm a bit reluctant to stretch it to include the impact of agriculture. This whole focus to begin with was to deal with sewage. I do know the impact of phosphates on our water courses, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same immediate impact on health as does sewage. So I would rather not extend it to the agricultural industry as yet. I know some initiatives are going on, and I do feel that if Cabinet is involved, that is sending a slightly more serious message to South West Water. And perhaps the Environment Agency could be included in that, but I do want to concentrate on the sewage aspect, not the other aspects of agricultural runoff. Councillor Arnott, if I can ask you, what do you feel? Do you feel you could get this before Cabinet in a reasonably timely fashion?
Well, that's very kind of you, Tom. Thank you very much for coming back to me. The answer really is yes. What we heard at strategic planning last week and was so terrible. And I did say there that we would need to write to our MPs as well, particularly with regard to the defunding of the Environment Agency. But I've spoken to the Chief Executive, and our intention is as urgently as possible to get a multi-agency meeting together. So we haven't got the format for that yet, Tom, but I would hope to have something on that, you know, by early next week, and to come back to you. And it's very important, you know, as leader, that absolutely wouldn't want to dissuade and can't dissuade scrutiny from ploughing its own furrow here. You must, but I just wanted to assure you that there is urgent action, and there has to be. I think Councillor Ranger's point is well made. You know, this could just drift, couldn't it? And we've got to rectify this now. the two issues, and I'm really mindful that what you're saying and this agenda item on the forward plan, sorry Anita, because this has now been 45 minutes after your clear guidance, it was brought by Jess about water and South West Water. I get that, but I think that's developed since last Thursday and the Natural England notification. And I think the news that's coming in about biodigesters as well, which we're working and we're likely to work very closely with Mid Devon on, I think it does feed into a wider tapestry, actually, which I think is probably what Anita was saying as well. I hope that helps. Thank you.
It does help, and I'm conscious of the fact that this committee can only recommend to Cabinet, whereas Cabinet can take the action first. And I don't want to give up on it, but I am having a little worm of a thought that we do set up the first meeting, but actually be willing to accept that if Cabinet is actually able to get more progress on this by the sort of steps that have been discussed, that we then do take the backward step and leave it to Cabinet and then scrutinise Cabinet. If Cabinet wants to take it on, we can then scrutinise Cabinet and ask them what they're doing about it. How does the committee feel about that?
Chair, Councillor Woodward has his hand up next.
I have, but I wasn't going to answer that specific question from the chair about the Cabinet, because I was looking at the forward plan proposals that we initially set out with the topics to consider. I just wanted to make the point about on planning, that we had the letter or the email from a member of the public, Mr. Crawford, today. It was sent to all council members, and he referred to transport. I just wanted to ensure that if we're considering planning and infrastructure, that we don't forget transport and the impact of that on how that can be dealt with within the infrastructure. So I just wanted to make sure that doesn't get missed. And hopefully that could be included within planning or maybe as a separate topic. So we have 4 topics, not 3.
The issue is on this, Tony, is that transport, which is a responsibility of the Highways Authority, the Highways Authority are statutory consultees and are able to have an impact at the planning debate with regard to what funding, what the developers have to do to ease a traffic problem. The difficulty with South West Water is they are not a strategic consultee. We pass plans for houses to be built. They take the money from the developers for connecting, but they don't actually have any statutory saying on our planning issues. That is the one fundamental difference. And I hope I'm right in that, Anita. But that is something that was raised at the last meeting, that we can't get developers to contribute to sewage, whereas we can get the developers to contribute to roads and transport. Sorry, who's next after that?
Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. I did hear today, but I need it confirmed, that bathing water would be tested all the year round from this September. Take that with a pinch of salt at the moment, but I should have some news in the next couple of days on that. The other thing, you mentioned that you don't want to look at agricultural runoff or industrial runoff, but just sewage. Bear in mind, sewage, that agricultural runoff and industrial pollution is as harmful as sewage itself. So if we're talking about danger to health, then we have to look at all 3. And as I'm responsible for environmental health, I think we have to look at all 3. Thank you.
I agree with that, Jeff, but if I don't want to sound sort of too aggressive, but at the moment it's South West Water are the target, and we can't concentrate on too many targets at one time. If we can do something with South West Water, often the farming issue is just a change of practice. It's not a question of infrastructure. It's just getting sometimes farmers to plough their fields across the grain as opposed to up and down it, which limits the runoff. But who's next, Sarah?
Councillor Parr is next.
Helen again, please.
Sorry, I thought Jess was before me, but I will just say I still think whatever Cabinet does, that scrutiny should carry on with what we were considering, having the 3 meetings and going in more or less as, I mean, I take on board what Anita has said about having more meetings. I mean, it's not going to be solved overnight. I don't see why we can't schedule in these other meetings, but I see what other people say.
I don't see any more hands up. Am I right on that?
Councillor Bailey, Councillor Ranger, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would very much say that Cabinet, of course, has an important role, and Councillor Young can do, whatever he sees fit as the portfolio holder for the environment, and engaging with farmers and everything. But I would say, and also, I understand that Councillor Arnott wants to deal on a kind of multi-agency basis with urgently. Particularly following on from the Axe Valley, but that is just one aspect. And I think that what's happening here is that the Scrutiny Committee, I mean, if you ask residents what's the single biggest, for many people, issue and frustration, it's about what's happening to our waterways, and it's South West Water's discharge into our waterways. And I think that this committee is potentially in danger of getting kind of sidetracked into a whole range of other things. And of course, there are many, many different dimensions to this particular concern. And of course, Cabinet has to do what it sees fit. And of course, Councillor Arnott, as a leader, has to have important and urgent meetings on those specific issues. But I would agree with Councillor Parr that that does not stop the Scrutiny Committee from scrutinising the company and South West Water and their actions on those 3 subjects. So I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. I think those two things can carry on at the same time, and the Cabinet can do whatever it wishes, to understandably to and have those urgent meetings. But I don't think that needs to stop the Scrutiny Committee from following the course that it decides to do with regard to South West Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess, and thanks for getting us back on track. I think we've discussed how we're going to proceed for some time. As I get it, we want to have these meetings. We want to schedule them. That is coming back to what is on the agenda. And the question was planning beach water and river water. And the invitation was for members to identify other topics, or do those 3 topics actually cover what we want to probe? Because if so, we can then set the agenda. We can now set the timetable to address those 3 specific topics.
Chair, just to say, you've got Councillor Ranger and Councillor Gardner, who were just still waiting, I think, to finish off the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I would like to know if there is a seconder to my proposal that I beg your pardon, my recommendation that we urgently request that Cabinet call together this meeting. And I'm happy to include beyond that our scrutiny continuing to keep their dates. But what I'm cautious about is we have so much to say. Right, sorry, I'll just backtrack. I'd like the recommendation to be that Cabinet get that meeting held as early as possible and report back, obviously, on the outcome of those meetings. I'm happy for the other meetings to continue, but I am mindful that if we batter South West Water, so we're always going to have this problem of tone in meetings and treading the careful line, which is difficult to do when they just give us an hour per topic. So I'd like to know if there is support from the committee that Cabinet call urgently that meeting as soon as possible, and report back. And it may be that as time goes on, when we're meeting South West Water over the months, you know, that they might be able to bring something positive back from their meetings with South West Water. So that's what I'd like to know, please. And
second.
When we've finished debating this, I do have a completely separate topic that I would like to recommend for the forward plan. Thank you.
I saw Eleanor raise her hand to second that motion. Am I right, Eleanor? So
Yeah.
Your motion is whatever else we decide to do later with regard to scrutiny's actions, we actually recommend to Cabinet that they, if you know, grasp this issue and arrange the meetings of consultation with the other parties in parallel with what we're doing. Is that what you're saying? So that is one recommendation. I see Eleanor is nodding enthusiastically. Can I have a vote on that then, please?
Chair voting's underway. And that's 8 green ticks in favour, with no red crosses and no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Now,
Councillor Gardner had a hand up. It disappeared when her vote came up. I don't know if that was deliberate or no, still waiting.
I'm still here.
Sorry, Cathy.
I'm still here. I'd just like to support what Councillor Bailey and Councillor Ranger, I think, were both saying similar things, and it was what I wanted to say, is that it's essential that whatever scrutiny decides to do, it does not delay in any way any work done by other members or groups on the council. So obviously we've got a recommendation come forward that Cabinet should proceed in whatever way they see fit with this issue, because it's huge. It's serious and multifactorial. I think also we should make it clear that if Councillor Young as portfolio holder also needs to set up some kind of working party, cross-group working party, however, that he should absolutely go ahead with that. And all these things should feed into one another. And that scrutiny's work carries on independently, because there is a huge risk that these meetings just drag on and we just talk and talk and talk. We can't tell South West Water what to do, but I think if we are able to make some serious statements about what we would like to see happen, at least the public should think that EDDC are trying to push things in the right direction. So I think what we should be is a facilitator for ourselves with South West Water, and not a break on anything that any of the other members, committees, Cabinet, whatever need to do. I think that's the most important thing. This is huge. We can focus on South West Water as a committee, but leaving everybody else to carry on and do what they can as quickly as possible.
that's very sensible, Cathy. Now, we're in a difficulty that Councillor Bailey, not being a member of this committee, can't put forward a proposal. Would one of the other committee members, Val or someone else, please put forward a recommendation which coincides with Councillor Bailey's aims? And I see Helen's got her hand up. What do you want to say, Helen?
Well, exactly that. I would like to propose again that we carry on with the programme as per our forward plan there. Schedule of meetings to be arranged, and as Anita has said, that I do think we need to keep it on as written there, that we do 3 meetings, planning, beach and river. I just need a seconder.
Second.
Sorry?
I would happily.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that if I'm not sure about how many meetings it is timetabled in, but surely we can timetable extra meetings in if necessary.
Should we go to the vote on that?
I was just going to try and add something to that. Totally agree with it, but perhaps put in to inquire of South West Water what their future infrastructure plans and timetable is, because that, if we sort out their infrastructure, all the problems downstream disappear. Now, Anita, can we ask a private company to tell us what their future strategic investment structure is? We can ask, but are they obliged to tell us?
We can always ask. They may tell us. They may have a public version of some of their documentation. Certainly worth asking. So we're going to add. So we're going with the forward plan wording, and I think within that we will incorporate anyway Councillor Bailey's point about timetabling for questions, so that everything is published ahead of time, so that there's clarity. We know that didn't work particularly well last time, so we picked that up. And then also, so as well as the forward plan proposal, we don't really need to propose it, but we can, to include a request that South West Water provide us with details of their future infrastructure plans. Is that right, Chair?
Yes, and how they fit with our local plan going forward.
Okay.
Chair. Oh, sorry.
I spoke to Ed Freeman briefly earlier, and he said he's quite looking forward to coming to talking to Scrutiny about planning and South West Water, and they've got some consultancy work going on that will feed into the local plan process as well. So I think it ties together. So if the proposer and seconder, Councillor Parr and Councillor Ranger, are happy with that amendment, I'm seeing nods, but there's also a waving hand from Councillor Woodward if you want to take that, Chair.
Yes, Tony.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, we discussed earlier what was mentioned about the timescale for these meetings and the questions and answers reply. I don't think we came to a decision on the time we would allow South West Water to reply to those questions, and whether 2 weeks would be an appropriate time rather than 1 week.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks is more appropriate. It gives them less wriggle room to say there's not enough time. But of course, that's a question of admin and our programming, which we can leave in the hands of Anita and Sarah, I hope. Okay. So
I think, Chair, we can, what we'll do, Sarah's built up quite a good relationship with them. I think we can tie down that detail with them, so that when this comes back to committee, we can give you that information, I think, so that we know. We very much do want to make sure that we get all the questions in advance to avoid the issues that we had last time. I think that's very much on everybody's mind.
Thank you.
To the last remaining hand from Councillor Young, and then we've got a vote to take, Chair.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, just another quick one, just to point out that the Axe catchment also includes some of the sewage works from Wessex. Now, although it's a small proportion, but there are some sewage works being discharged by another company into the Axe catchment. So we need to bear that in mind.
Trust you to complicate it. Anyway, we've had the proposal. Can it now go to the vote, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and voting is underway. It's 9 green ticks, 11, still going up. 11 green ticks in favour with no red crosses against and no abstentions.
Thank you. Now, are we just going to leave that and come to the timing for beach water and river water later? It might be that Jeff's sort of information that the beach water monitoring is now going ahead all year round goes some way to dealing with that. But of course, the other issue is it's not just monitoring. This is where we come into our environmental health people, is it's getting that information of the monitoring to the people who want to use the water. So we'll definitely need to use environmental health and possibly street scene, because environmental health get the warnings, and I think street scene run the gear that publishes them. I think I'm right on that.
That's my understanding, Chair.
I don't know what I've just said, really, other than we've identified the main issue, which is what goes into the sewage, because if that's sorted, the other things fall by. So the main focus of our attention must be South West Water, and this next meeting will go some way to assisting us with that.
Yeah, and Chair, once we've got an idea of how members want to move forward, then we can get a timetable in place and start to get officers teed up and get some content and get going now that we know what we're doing. So I think that's fine on that issue. And I think Councillor Ranger had another potential matter to raise.
Yeah, we've also got, before we come to Val, we've got the other items, expenditure on consultants, Mid-Devon and Scrutiny with regard to anaerobic digesters, but I think strategic planning had taken that on board anyway. And the local plan allocation and sites. I would rather concentrate our minds on the main issue of the sewage and water, because I think that's the most important thing we have. But Val, what is it I think I have an idea what you want to suggest, so off you go. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I just wondered if we could pencil it in. I circulated a document earlier that it is time that East Devon District Council had a proper register of the assets that they own. Obviously I put my proposal form in too late for us to have some feedback from from either Anita Williams or Henry Gordon Lennox. But if we could possibly pencil that in, because I'm mindful, I'm looking at the forward plan. We're already into the autumn, and we can't just keep pushing things away. My other item is on our quarterly report. We always have a little section on staff leavers and staff sickness. So my other question is, could we have a monthly update on staff leavers and new staff to come, so that we know, you're trying to get hold of a member of staff and it turns out they've left, or somebody's new in post and we didn't realize and we're asking them questions. So that is my other. I don't want to step onto the personnel committee's toes, but I understand that I think now staff get that information. So I think it would be useful if all councillors could get that information on a monthly basis, or however frequently that information is disseminated to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. On your first point about asset management, can this committee request the relevant portfolio holder and head of service let us know where they are with regard to completing the asset management register? We can do that, can't we?
Chair, may I?
Yep, certainly.
So having had the heads up from Councillor Ranger, I've had a chat with Tim Child, who's the service lead. The asset register exists. The difficulty is it is not easily accessible to members because it's run via a system called Uniform. I've had the pleasure of a Uniform demo. It holds masses of information, but it is an internal system. So they're going to look at what they've done in the past is exported bits of it to Excel, which produces a list, but is not as user friendly. So Tim's looking at that. You could ask Tim and Councillor Hayward if you wanted to attend, but I think it exists. Tied in with that point and picking up the other point about starters and leavers and general information. Andrew Hopkins is here. I've had a chat with Andrew and he's got I think some suggestions about how to manage that, Chair, if you might like to hear from Andrew.
That's very good. Yes, Andrew, please, what have you to say?
Yeah, hi members and hi chair. Yeah, in terms of Councillor Ranger's request, we can facilitate. I'm happy to. We put something together for staff members. We have a weekly newsletter. I'm happy to do a sort of monthly newsletter to give that information if that would be helpful. The question really is if there is other information that we could include within that newsletter that would be of use to members. So I'm welcome to your suggestions on how we develop that together. And also in answer to what you were just talking about a few moments ago, we are looking within the comms team now, we have a data analyst. So we're looking at how we facilitate your other request as well. So hopefully we'll have both answers. But if you have any suggestions in terms of the newsletter aspect and information you want within, I'm happy to take that and how we can facilitate that moving forward.
Thank you. And you said a dangerous thing then. We will have that. The next question is obviously when.
I'm happy to prepare it whenever you'd like it prepared. So.
Oh, that's a very good promise. Members, what information would you like on the asset management and the people question? You know, who's where, who's doing what, and when. I think that's something. You know, I liked when I go around and there's a new member of staff. A new member of, for example, our street scene, I make a point of introducing myself and inviting him to introduce him or herself to me. And I think it's good that we should want to know and try to get to know our people. So what information would people like? Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Parr and then Councillor Ranger both have their hands up.
And again, please.
Sorry, it's not on that question you've just raised, but just to say at the correct moment when we've gone through the meetings on the Environment Agent on South West Water, could we have a meeting with the Environment Agency to see how they fit in with this picture?
I think the Environment Agency have always been, and I think they feature in the papers, have always been someone we should consider. And it might be an opportunity for them to come and tell the Scrutiny Committee what resource problems they're operating under, because we may be in a position to assist with that. So I think that's a very legitimate point. And Sarah, have you made a note of that?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Chair.
And Val, your next point, please.
Thank you. Just for Andrew, thank you for asking that question, Andrew. Perhaps an organisational chart, who we should contact, because I know historically sometimes we're told we should contact kind of a head of service and they would tell us who to contact, but it is useful to know, I think, you know, for example, that 10 people work for person X, or 22 people work for person X, or 3 people work for person X. That's what I like about an organisational chart. You can see the size of the team. And the other thing is current vacancies, because you just never know. We might know people that would, you know, I mean, current vacancies need to be advertised everywhere. And sometimes, you know, you come across people who are looking for a role, and then, you know, if we know that there is a role, for example, East Devon District Council, that would be very useful. Thank you.
Are you all right with that, Andrew?
Yeah, if you're happy for me to come back and answer that question, because one of the things I could do, if it would be helpful, we are starting to produce a newsletter that goes out whenever there's job vacancies. So I could add all members onto that circulation list. So if that would help in addition to the thing we've talked about in terms of starters and leavers. But if you'd like to see the vacancies here, I'm happy to do that. So, and I can see a thumbs up. So I'll make sure I'll add you all to that list. So another newsletter to your email. So.
That actually answers another question as well. It will enable us to be more, if we see lots of vacancies advertised, it lets us know where there are pressures on the service. If we see there are vacancies in a service area, that will perhaps make us be a little bit more sympathetic when we feel the services aren't performing as well as we would like them to do. So identifying gaps in the team on the team sheet is quite a valuable thing to know. Thank you.
Cool, will do.
And no further hands up, Chair.
Thank you. Then the other thing is that the one firm date we've got is autumn 22, the portfolio holders report on training strategy. That is the one thing we've got in our timetable, and that's not a matter of many months away. So I see no other hands up. We've set out what we're going to do with regard to South West Water. We've agreed that eventually we will also include the Environment Agency. We have actually recommended to Cabinet that they actually take some urgent action with regard to our sewage problems. And we've also asked for the update on asset management and the update on staffing. Is there anything else people think we should cover this evening? Well, that's a relief. Am I permitted then to close the meeting? You'll be glad to know that it's closed rather more quickly than the previous meetings I'm chaired, and I think that's down to members actually concentrating on what we're talking about. So thank you all very much. Enjoy your evenings.